What's going on, guys? Dan Watson, Learning Cameras, and here I've got two new cameras, and this is the T7i and the Canon 77D. And these are two cameras that just recently came out. Canon announced them both at the same time. And the big question is, which one do I want to buy? Because they're both very, very similar. They came out about the same time, but the naming scheme is a little bit different, and that's going to give us a little bit of insight into how these cameras operate. So let's talk about that for a little bit. This is a Canon T7i. It's something that we're very used to. Canon has had their T6is and other cameras like that for a long time. They've been doing that same model camera. This seems a little bit newer. It's the Canon 77D. And what this is it kind of places it as more of a baby 80D, more so than a big brother of the T7i. But there's a lot of similarities between them because they both got announced at the same time. And so we're going to take a look at some of those differences and which one might be right for you, and also give a little bit of comparison with the Canon 80D because that might be the right option for many of you out there. Now, I did also want to let you know that I've created a Facebook group for these cameras, and the reason for that is to give you an opportunity to post your pictures, ask your questions, and me to give you some more one-on-one answers than I can do in these YouTube videos. Also, this is a part series. We're going to be exploring all the details of the T7i and 77D, including how to set them up, some of the images, how to get the best images, some of the lenses that you want to use. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that, subscribe, and you're going to get notified when those new videos come out. But for a little bit more one-on-one, head in the description below. Right at the top, you're going to see a link to our Facebook group, and you can join that and get some of the details there. So let's dive into these cameras a little bit and explore some of the things that you would like to look at. Now, pretty much all the new changes on this camera are actually related to the physical aspects of the camera, not really the internals. Internally, they're both using the same 24 megapixel sensor. We have a brand new 45-point dual pixel cross-type focus system, which is brand new for these T-series cameras. And it is a great focus system. I'm really excited about it. Whether you're shooting video or photo, the results are going to look unbelievable, and we'll be doing some tests on that later. But overall, the main differences between these are actually going to be on the top and the back of the cameras and the physical dials. And what that is on the Canon 77D, they've actually made the dial over onto the left side, and that's going to give you some room over on the right side for this new screen. Now, you've seen these screens before. You've seen them on the Canon 80D, 70 Mark IIs, and on up. It's more of a professional series camera because it allows you to look at your settings quickly as you would be taking pictures and not really take your face away from the camera all the way. Now, if you're shooting live view, which is probably how many of you are going to be shooting, then this is not going to be that big of a deal because, you know, most of the time my camera is going to be here out in front of me, and I'm going to be able to see all of my settings on the screen itself. So probably not a big deal for most of you, and I'm not too sure that this would be a big motivating factor for me. We do have a couple additional buttons, and the main one is going to be this new AF on button that's going to be located right here on the right side. This is a very popular button if you're shooting back button autofocus, or if you use it as I do when you're shooting servo, you can use this to stop autofocus. So either way, you can configure the camera, and it's a nice thing to have. I honestly do not use back button autofocus anymore. I don't think there's too much of a need with these very advanced cameras with advanced focus systems. I just don't think it's there. So that's another feature right there that I don't think is all going to be all that necessary. And the other differences you're going to see, one is, by the way, we now have this new Wi-Fi button on here, and that's because these cameras not only have Wi-Fi, NFC, but they also have Bluetooth Low Energy, so that's great. It's going to help you keep the settings on the camera. So while you're navigating the camera, you can be sending over images via Bluetooth, and it makes it much quicker for starting up your Wi-Fi connection. But the big difference is now, instead of this 4-button joystick, we now have an additional dial here. And that dial is going to mean that if you're shooting manually, you have one control wheel for your shutter speed and then the other one for your aperture, and it's really nice to have. So if you're shooting more manual shooting, I would say is going to be the big difference between those. That's when you're going to want this dial even a little bit more. Now on the T7i, you can still have that same functionality. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to hit this AV button plus or minus right here, and then that front scroll wheel is going to allow you to adjust your aperture. So it's really not too big of a deal. I don't mind shooting either way. And now you'll see we also have the additional lock button, and this lock button allows you to mostly lock this dial. That's what I use it for. And so if you ever accidentally hit this or don't want to accidentally hit it, you can just flip up that switch and lock that dial right in place. The only other major difference is on the internals for this, and it's going to be the addition of a bulb mode in the 77D and also some interval options. So if you want to shoot intervals, you can do that. Now both of them are going to have the ability to do time lapse, and so again, I just really don't see much of a pressing argument for going for the 77D instead of the T7i. And yes, it is a better camera and it does give you some more aspects of a professional end camera, but none of them are really going to impact your photo quality or the type of shooting you do. And so with that in mind, I think I would save my money and get the T7i and then use that money and get some upgraded lenses. And I'm going to put a list of lenses together for what you guys should be looking at when you get that lens. And there is a lens that's very important to me, and it's a 50mm f1.8. And if it's something you're starting out on, you don't own anything except the kit lenses, that's going to be a great lens to go. And it's about $150 more expensive, or $150 for that lens. And that's going to come close to the differences between the cost of these. So for me, I would be more likely to pick the T7i and then get that 50mm f1.8. Now where there is going to be a big difference is a Canon 80D. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Now on the 80D, it's going to look very similar to the 77D, and that is because both of these are kind of in that same lineage. However, there are some major differences. The 80D is going to be a much larger body. It is also going to give you weather sealing, and with that comes a shutter is rated to 100,000 actuations, whereas there is no rating on this. So it's basically like a warranty on your shutter saying it's made to be shooting a lot more photos. It's also going to be a little bit faster on that and give you some extra buttons that you're probably not used to. Now, additionally, the viewfinder is going to be a little bit bigger, and it's going to give you 100% viewfinder coverage. And what that means is when you're looking through that viewfinder, exactly what you see in that viewfinder is exactly what the photo is going to be. And there's some little things that get clipped off of the side of some of these smaller, cheaper cameras, but that's going to be a 100% viewfinder on the 80D that you don't get on the 77D. And also, both of these are good for videos. This has a microphone input, which is very nice, but you do not get a headphone output on the 77D, and that is something that is a feature reserved for the 80D. More on some of those professional end features. One of them is that every lens has some different characteristics to it, and sometimes the lens, if you're shooting very shallow depth of field, will either focus a little bit too close or a little bit too far away. And some of your more advanced cameras like the 80D have the ability to adjust that. And so if you're shooting a lot with wide aperture primes or your focus is going to be extremely critical, you have the ability to compensate for some issues that come with lenses on that. And that's another one of those advanced features that's great to have. You also have a lot more AF settings, so if you want to kind of fine tune much of that, you're going to be able to do that on the Canon 80D. The 80D also steps you up into the bigger battery that you're going to see in other more expensive cameras like the 5D Mark IV, the 7D Mark II. It's going to have that larger battery, and with that's going to be a little bit extra battery life. In addition, you can also buy a battery grip for it, which is going to give you extra controls on it, and it's also going to give you the ability to shoot dual batteries on that. So if you're shooting for all day long and you don't want to have to worry about changing batteries during the day, that's going to be a great way to go. Or if you're shooting on a tripod all the time and you don't have access to this door, it's great to be shooting with that battery grip because you're not going to be changing those batteries all the time. Now there are two negatives with that, and one is that there's a couple little features that we can't have on the brand new camera, and that is going to be that the 80D comes with a little bit older and slower processor. So it comes with a Digic 6 processor instead of a 7. What that's going to mean is potentially a little bit worse high ISO performance if you're shooting in JPEGs. I really don't think it's going to be significant, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. And then the other thing it's not going to give us is our digital image stabilization. I haven't tested that yet, so stay tuned because we're going to find out if that's really worth it. Now, if you're using a lens that already has image stabilization, most likely that's going to be the best way to go. But if you don't have a lens, we're going to have to take a look and see how much that digital stabilization is going to help. The other thing that the 80D doesn't have is Bluetooth, and that's really not a big deal. You can still connect and have all your options with the built-in Wi-Fi and NFC. It just helps for keeping that Wi-Fi connection kind of alive and in the background while you're shooting. So it could be a decent option, but it's really not something I'd worry about. Now the last thing the 80D is going to offer you is you're going to get your shutter speed to a maximum of an 8,000th of a second versus a 4,000th on both of these. And that is very nice if you're shooting with some wide open prime lenses in daylight that's very bright. It's going to allow you to open up that aperture a little bit more and stop down your shutter speed to an 8,000th of a second. And with that comes a flash sync speed that's now good to a 250th of a second instead of a 200. So if you're shooting with flash a lot, especially in daylight, that would help quite a bit on that. So those are overall the differences, and that's why I said for me, if you're looking at the 77D, if you heard the feature list on the 80D is just, there are a ton more features and all of them will affect some ways that you're shooting and a lot more advanced options. It really just doesn't seem as necessary for me to go with the 77D versus the T7i. If you're really looking at getting something better, the 80D might be where I would jump to, and that's a line that's a little bit more into the professional series and gives you some of those features that you would be looking for if you were shooting quite a bit. So that's it. Stay tuned. We have a whole bunch more stuff on these, and ask me your questions below in the comments or head to that Facebook group, and that's where we can share a little bit more information. I can give you some longer responses on that. So tell me what you think. Tell me which one you're considering. If you just bought it, head to that Facebook group and post some pictures so we can all take a look, and stay tuned. We got a lot more to come.